Okay, so let's talk about trust. So, fearful avoidance obviously generally struggle the most with trust. And I think a lot of fearful avoidance think I can't even repair trust because it's not possible. Once trust is broken, it's impossible to turn around. And everybody's really entitled to say, hey, once trust is broken in a specific area, like some people have really hard boundaries and non-negotiables. Like if somebody lies about something really important, if somebody cheats in a relationship, if, whatever those things are, sometimes people in those areas will feel like, okay, trust has been broken. The non-negotiables are these things, and you're entitled to that. That's just a boundary, okay? But there are a lot of couples who go through things, especially in like long-term relationships or marriages, where trust is going to be challenged at different times. And so in order to rebuild trust, we first have to really clearly define what trust is. And then I'm going to take you guys through a bit of a process about what we can do if we're facing a big pain point to trust. And as you're sitting here and you're participating in this webinar, I want you to sit and sort of bring up in your mind the person or the people who you feel like trust has been violated with the most in your life, and pick somebody who you want to repair it with, so you can apply some of these tools and shift some of these perspectives and become aware of some of these patterns in relationship to something that's personally, specifically going to benefit you in your life. So first and foremost, trust is usually based on two core things in any relationship, whether it's with a friendship, a family member, a romantic partner, one of your children, anything like that. So trust is number one, based on congruency, okay? It's like if you come to my home and I say, yeah, every time you come over, I'll grab you a cup of tea. And then I keep saying that I'm going to grab you a cup of tea when you come over, but I always forget and I never do. You're not going to trust me to grab you a cup of tea. You might trust me with a whole bunch of other things, but not that. And so when we are feeling distrust in a relationship, if it is a relationship that we want to solve a problem with, we have to define specifically where that distrust is. So I'll get to that in 1 second. So trust is based on number one, congruency. And number two, this belief that the person that you're in this trusting relationship with will take you into consideration as they make choices. So for example, if you have a joint bank account with your spouse and they're like, I feel like buying a new car, and you guys have a monthly budget, the person's probably violating your trust if they just go buy a new car and they come home and they're like, hey, I got a new car today with our money. What do you think? Right? So there can be these dynamics or situations where when somebody is not taking you into consideration, that's going to be what's violating trust. Now, obviously, those same things happen with lying, right? Obviously somebody's not thinking about how this would impact you in the relationship if they found out that you were dishonest, or if you found out that they were dishonest. And infidelity, right? Like what do people do when that happens? That, the relationship, the things I hear the most about why infidelity hurts people is that it's like, we built this connection together, this relationship together, we did all these things together, and that wasn't taken into consideration. Like that wasn't valuable enough to you in that moment to be able to think differently or approach the situation differently. And these are the things that we'll hear, right? So that being said, that's what trust is. One really big problem I see people running into in whatever relationship it is when they're trying to rebuild trust is going like this. People go, oh, this person lied about that thing. I don't trust that person at all. And I see, especially in like marriages, that, I've seen an example I use around this that's really clear is a woman I was speaking with once, and her husband was the primary, he was like the only one working in the household, and he never missed a day at work, and he was a good father and good with their kids and all these different things, but he would really drink a lot, like binge drink a lot, and kind of black out on weekends and kind of have all these messy things going on. And she was like, I don't trust him at all anymore. And he wouldn't lie about drinking, but he would just go and get too drunk all the time, and he sort of lie by omission, right? Like have some alcohol in his soda during the day, at home. These different sort of like obviously violations of trust. And when there was a problem and they were talking about it. So So she said, I don't trust him at all as a person. And when you do that, when we put this like distrust stamp on people, it becomes that much more challenging. It becomes almost impossible to heal because it's like, I just don't trust you as a human being. And then it's like, well, how can you get past that? But if you can define the very specific area where trust has been threatened, now it becomes a solvable problem. And you'll hear me say this a lot because I'm going to push this message a lot, because when we can start thinking like this, it's very transformational in our lives, if transformational is a word. But one of the most important things whenever we have a problem is we have to isolate what that problem is. That's the first step to healing anything, is like get really clear and isolate, like, what is the issue? What is the core of this issue specifically? And once we do that, once we're like, okay, this is the core issue, the next step is to figure out what is the root problem that causes this issue. Because if we just address an issue at its surface level, at its symptom level, we're going to have a tough time getting ahead in any area of our life, right? So I'll go into a couple other things really quick before we go into like the tools to rebuild trust and to change trust. So again, pick somebody in your mind right now that you want to work on rebuilding trust with. And rebuilding trust also doesn't mean that like you're letting that person back into your life if they're an unhealthy character, right? This isn't like rebuild trust with the person who like hurt your pets. Like we were clear, right, about the boundary here. That's a really horrible example. So it was the first thing that came into my head. Okay. A few things that rebuild trust. Open communication builds trust. The more vulnerability we bring into relationships, we build trust. If people don't take accountability for things, destroys trust. One of the most important things we can do as human beings, if you're the one that made a mistake, is be accountable. It's almost impossible to truly move through things if accountability isn't a piece of the puzzle. Okay, so check in for a moment before we dive into like how to fix rebuilding trust for somebody else. Look at your life for a moment. These aren't easy, this isn't for the faint of heart, but look at your life. And I want you to look in the 7 areas of life, in your career, in your finances, in your mental, emotional life, your spiritual, physical, and financial, and or in relationships, so friends, family, partner, unless people are into polyamory, which is totally acceptable. But look at these different areas of your life. And I want you to ask yourself, where am I incongruent? Or where is somebody in my life causing me pain in their incongruency? Because it's something that matters. Like if you come to my home and I forget to bring you tea, that might not be a big deal for you. You might be like, wow, she's very forgetful about tea, but it may not be a huge thing. If there's your boss and you keep asking for a raise and he just constantly is like, yeah, we'll get a raise in a year. And then a year comes and you're, another year, then that might be a trust issue. So go there and ask yourself, where are you incongruent, or where is somebody in your life incongruent? Okay. So when we're looking at if trust is broken, number 1, isolate the very specific problem. Where has trust been broken for you in your life? Okay. It just like that example of the woman with her husband. It wasn't her husband being, terrible to the kids, leaving them out on the street when he's supposed to be paying the bills. It wasn't like this whole character, who he was, that was this distrustful person. It was that he had a problem in a very specific area. And if we really want to fix something, we have to dial into that area. In fact, if we want to try to fix something, if we want to see if there's hope to fix something, we have to dial it in. Okay. Sometimes you'll get there and you'll do this work and you'll be like, okay, this person keeps still not showing up. And, even if this isn't the biggest thing, this isn't the person as a whole, this one area, it's too painful for me and I have to set a boundary and walk away. But you're not going to know that and be able to walk away guilt and regret free and heal faster along the way if you don't dive right into that thing head first initially and give yourself the chance to truly see it for yourself. So when you walk away, you just know with certainty that that's the right decision.